all, thank you. Thanks to the wonderful folks here at Montgomery College for hosting this really important event. And thank you guys for coming along and having the time to inform yourself a little bit more about this really important victory for our community and this very important opportunity that we need to make sure that everybody takes advantage of. So today, my two colleagues here and I have two kind of objectives. First of all, we want to talk to you basically about what DACA is, how to take advantage of it, what benefits it brings you, and how to take advantage of it right now, and how to benefit from the opportunity, right? Secondly, and I think most importantly, is to understand that this isn't all that there is out there right now. There are opportunities to further the opportunity, to further the benefits to many more people in this community, many more immigrants, or your parents, your family, your relatives, and give them the same opportunity, if not a better opportunity, to thrive in this country, and provide them an opportunity to be recognized by the government as legitimate individuals with an opportunity to work, an opportunity to contribute to society, and be full both representatives and citizens of this country. And we have an amazing opportunity right now to make a dramatic change for our communities. We're going to explain a little bit more about why. These two individuals did a great job of getting us to where we are now, and their action and their ability to stand up and come before folks like you guys to talk about their individual stories, and further advocate for our community, got us the victories that we have now. So now what we're here to ask of you is not only to benefit from what we have now, but to join them in their struggle to continue the fight and make this opportunity something that we can all benefit from, or many in our community benefit from. Okay, so first of all, we're going to talk a little bit about DACA itself, what it is, how to benefit from it. We're calling it a victory because that's what it is for our community. It is a victory that we created for ourselves. This is not something that was bestowed upon us by a political figure, no matter how much we all like President Obama. He didn't give this to us because we were nice people, right? He gave this opportunity to us because we fought for it and we asked for it. We demanded it, and that is the only way to create positive social change in this community. It's standing up for your rights. It's joining with your community and making sure that we're all accounted for. So, what does it really do? So this was his first step. It was a step he created in 2012, after years and years of advocacy from youth, just like the youth you see here before you, to first of all legalize a certain segment of the community. When I say legalize, that's I'm basically talking about having the opportunity to work and be recognized by the U.S. government and not being harassed by immigration officials and not being harassed and threatened with things like deportation. This was an opportunity that President Obama had to respond to the demands of the community, and he stepped up in 2012. We call it our first step and our first victory in immigration reform. There's still a lot more to be done, but this was a very important step that he took in 2012 to provide opportunity, like the two gentlemen that we see before you and hundreds of thousands of others, to go to school, to have a job, to provide for their families, to have a future in this community, right? Now, there are a lot of things that it did beyond just providing papers, let's say, for lack of a better word for folks. It did also limit the powers of Immigration and Customs Enforcement, or known as ICE, right? It limited their ability to deport these folks. It used what we continue to call prosecutorial discretion on these folks and through their discretion, allow them to remain in the country and allow them to not be deported. One of the limitations, as you can see there, is that it's an executive order. An executive order meaning that it's not a law. This is something that was bestowed upon us by the President of the United States. So long as he's there, this program continues. In order for it to survive or strengthen or expand, we need to work on who's going to be taking his place in the White House, right? This only lasts as long as he's around. And any guarantees need to be guaranteed to us through whoever's going to take his place. Okay, so it is technically an executive order that is only effective so long as that executive is around. Right? Well, and who made this happen? It happened, and again, we're going to talk with Jose, we're going to talk with Yves about how this victory was won. But it happened, again, just to reemphasize, it happened through the collective efforts of like people in this room, people very similar to this room. It didn't just happen because somebody wanted to give us a nice little present. It happened because people stood up and demanded it to happen, right? We're going to talk a little bit more to Yves and to Jose to talk a little bit about more about their experience. But organizations like CASA had a big say in making this a reality, just like cementing the DREAM Act here in Maryland. CASA was a major factor. Why? Because it's not CASA the employees and the staff like me or my boss or Gustavo Torres. CASA is everybody that becomes a member of that organization, is the community. When people act collectively and through one voice demand their rights, you start to see change happen. And yes, it is a numbers game. When you have hundreds of thousands of people that collectively act, that's when you see the results that you want, right? So again, and how does this happen? It happens through rallies. It happens through civil disobedience. You can see some nice pictures here of some of the earlier rallies that we had on reform, on DACA, on DAPA, and we'll talk a little bit about DAPA in a second. But it happened through collective action, and by collective action, that's working together to create these actions. It's through phone calls, through civil disobedience, through respectfully telling authority that, no, this is not right. We demand better and we deserve better. And through those actions, that's when we start contacting our congressional representatives. Through those type of events, through those type of tactics, we start knocking on doors. We start getting other people involved. We start getting other people interested. And that's when we start pressuring elected leaders directly on how to make change, on demanding what we all deserve. But it is through the cumulative effort. Like one person, one individual, one action does not make a difference, right? But collectively, when you're part of a large group, when you're part of a coalition of folks that are as diverse as this country is, when we're talking about coalitions of multiracial coalitions, African Americans, Asian Americans, Native Americans working together with Latinos, and together we demand what we deserve, we start to see that change. And it's a slow process, and it's frustrating at times, but you can see the results kind of before you. And like I said, we'll get to Jose and Yves in a second. But again, just to reemphasize, a lot of these victories are the result of a collective struggle over a long period of time. One action, one individual may be silenced, may be compartmentalized, but working together collectively, figuring out how to work together across different communities, finding one collective voice to make change, that's when we really see some of the results. But again, just to reiterate what we talk about when we talk about DACA, it is a fight overall for immigration reform, and it is a first step in that process. But it's really important and very important to motivate all of us that may be benefiting from some of these measures that it is temporary. And we have to hold policymakers accountable for their promises, and we have to continue to push for more. Now, a lot is being heard right now about what's going on with the administrative relief measures that were announced in November of last year. Remember November of last year? We're coming up on a year almost when we all thought that not only were youth going to benefit from this wonderful opportunity, but also the parents of U.S.-born citizens. U.S.-born citizens, we're going to have an opportunity to obtain a work permit for 3 years. We know that that's right now mired in a lot of judicial proceedings. We're awaiting a decision at the circuit court for it to go on to the Supreme Court. But and it gets a little confusing as to what's going on and who's eligible for what. But one thing, I really want to reiterate, because today we're talking exclusively about DACA, the DACA program. That DACA continues. Okay, DACA is not being discussed in the courts. DACA is not being administratively reviewed. DACA is a program that continues to receive applicants. Hundreds and thousands of people continue to benefit from DACA and continue to apply for DACA. So it's really important to understand that if you are eligible for this program, and now remember, it was the program that was announced in 2012, you can apply today. You don't have to wait for anything else. You don't have to wait for any kind of decision. What's being reviewed in the courts right now is the new administrative relief measures that the president announced in November of 2014, okay? And that was a little bit of an expansion of DACA, and it was going to be a new program that was gonna allow parents of US citizen children an opportunity to obtain work permits, okay? But the DACA program for youth that was originally announced in 2012 continues to be in effect, okay? But we all need to remember that these, again, I hate to continue to talk about how limited, how temporary the program is, but again, it should motivate all of us to take action and make sure that these benefits and these promises by the Obama administration are not only continue and not only continue to benefit those that he had originally envisioned to benefit, but to realize that these upcoming elections provide us an opportunity to expand upon those promises and hold candidates accountable to providing those benefits to everybody that deserves. All folks that are hardworking in this community, all folks that have raised their children and are working for a better life in this community. It's we all deserve a shot to be recognized by the U.S. government with a work permit. Okay, so we dove a little bit into what's going on with DAPA. I want to kind of back up a little bit and talk about specifically the Deferred Action for Childhood Arrivals program, the DACA program. Okay, so again, this is the DACA program that was announced in 2012 by the president. Okay, so essentially, this program provides a work permit for those that are eligible for a period of 2 years. Okay, so with that work permit, you have the ability to obtain a Social Security card. The work permit allows you to be employed by any employer in this country. Okay, the work authorization allows you to be a full. Allows you to be an employee of any organization and any entity that's permitted in this country, okay? And you are allowed to benefit from any of their benefits. So if they have health benefits, if they have whatever kind of benefits they provide their employees, you can apply, you can benefit from the entire employee benefits package, okay? There is no additional permit that you need. You have a full work authorization to work in this country, okay? Now, it is temporary because it was only designated to be valid for 2 years. But the 2 years are renewable. And many folks that originally got their permits in 2012 have already started to apply or have already received their renewal for their second phase. Okay? So as long as this benefit continues to be valid, as long as we have the Obama administration at the White House, we have the opportunity to renew these permits. These permits continue to be renewable. Okay? So one thing that a lot of people get a little bit confused of is it doesn't guarantee you the right to travel abroad, because many folks think, okay, I have a work permit, I have DACA, I'm a resident, I'm a citizen. No, it's not citizenship and it's not green card status. Okay? It is work authorization only. You can travel abroad. There is an opportunity to travel abroad, but that's an additional permit you have to request from the U.S. Citizenship and Immigration Service. So it's an additional permit you get just for that particular trip that you're going to take. And there's only certain reasons why you can travel. If you have a family emergency, there's about 4 different types of categories that you can apply under, okay? But remember, like even if when you obtain your DACA, remember, it doesn't guarantee you the right to travel. You can travel, right? But you just won't be able to come back in unless you have the second permit, okay? So nobody's gonna stop you at the airport and say you can't travel. You can travel, but you won't be allowed back into the country unless you have the second permit, okay? That's only after you obtain DACA and the work authorization, okay? But just remember, it's not a green card, okay? It's not a visa. It's not it's not citizenship. Right now, it's not a path to citizenship, okay? It's a temporary work authorization for a period of 2 years. Now, I mentioned that as an employee, you could benefit from the full employee package. So if that package includes health benefits and all that, you can benefit from all that through your employer, okay? But on your own, if you're not through your job, on your own, you're not eligible to receive any public benefits, okay? So that means like food stamps, that means stuff like the ACA, the Affordable Care Act, Medicaid, those things you're not eligible to receive as an applicant on your own if it's not through your employer, okay? So through your employer, full benefits package. But if you're not currently employed, you don't have access to those public benefits on your own, okay? And now, a lot of times, so we'll talk a little bit about eligibility for the program, but it is what's called discretionary. Discretionary is a fancy word to say that if you get yourself in trouble or if you do something that immigration doesn't like, they can basically reject your application, okay? So it is, but at the same time, if you don't quite qualify under every requirement, but you're close, there is immigration does have some authority, some discretionary authority to approve your case. If you have other factors in your case that provide you, that put you in a different light, that put you in a much more positive light, okay? We'll talk a little bit about what that means when we get into the specific requirements. So specific requirements, these are the specific requirements to be eligible for DACA. So DACA is again, these programs are very specific. They have very strict lines of who is eligible and who isn't, okay? So a lot of this has to do with the date that the president announced this program. And the date that he announced the program was June 15th of 2012. Okay, that is a very key date. Because when he announced that date, he said that every youth that entered the country before they turned 16 and then had been in the country for at least 5 years back from that date is eligible for this program. Okay, so that's why that date right there is so important, June 15th of 2012. That means, so in other words, that basically means that to qualify, you have to prove that you entered the country before you turned 16. Okay, so if you entered after you turned 16, if you entered when you were 16 and 3 days, you're not eligible. Just like that. Okay, you have to prove that you came into the country before you turned 16. You have to prove that you were born after June 15th of 1981. Okay? So basically, those that were eligible on that date had to be under 30 years old. So June 15th, you had to be born after June 15th of 1981 to qualify. Okay? You have to prove, and this is kind of annoying, but everybody has to prove that they were in the country on the specific date that Obama announced the opportunity, which was June 15th of 2012. So it's kind of weird. You don't have to show like pictures of yourself watching TV as he's on TV or anything like that. But you do have to prove in your documents that you were here on that date, okay? So you have to prove that you entered the country before 5 years prior to that date. So on June 15th, so basically on June 14th, 2007, you had to be in the country already. Okay, that's the latest date you can show that you were in the country. So June 14th, 2007. You have to live, this gets tricky, and we'll get into why this is tricky in a little bit. You have to prove that you live continuously in the country since that date. So you have to prove that you didn't leave for an extended period of time. You have to prove that since June 15th of 2007, you were basically living here and you were continuously residing here. You weren't going back and forth to your home country, etc. And you have to prove that you were either a high school graduate, you obtained your GED, or that at the time that you apply, you're currently enrolled in some sort of accredited course. And now they have expanded the list of accredited courses. You can even say if you're in like an ESOL class, you can qualify for that. If you're in a workforce development class and you're trying to increase your skills, you can apply, okay? But you had to have either graduated from a high school, obtained a GED, or be enrolled in a course, okay? So I know that's it's a little annoying, the specific dates on all of this, but all of these are very, very important because you have to prove that on your application. Okay, these dates are very specific. Okay, so if you qualify, when can you apply? And I hope you see that it says now. So please, if you qualify, don't hesitate. Please apply as soon as possible, okay? Now, quickly, we'll just get into stuff that may disqualify you, and then I'm gonna turn it over to my compañeros over here. So quickly, remember I mentioned it's a discretionary program that, you know, if you know you have some issues in your past, even though you qualify based on all those other requirements, they may not grant you the DACA. And so those include some of these details, okay? Basically, if you have one felony on your criminal record, and a felony is usually described as a situation where you went to court, you were accused of something in court, and the judge sentenced you to something like more than a year in jail. That's usually a felony. It depends on where it happened, but usually that's a felony. You have something that on your record, sorry, you can't qualify. And actually, really, you shouldn't submit your application because remember where this application is going. This application is going to it's not the same office, but it is, they are related to, they have some connection with ICE, right? We do not want to send them applications of folks that may not be eligible that they may wind up deporting, okay? So please, please don't submit an application if you don't strictly qualify under all of this, right? Now, if you have more than 2 misdemeanors in your record, we've all had issues in our lives. We all had, you know, maybe some of us more than others. Jose, Eves, I'm not pointing the finger at you, but we've all had situations. No, just kidding. They're completely clean. But we've all had situations and pasts, right? There's a variety. Misdemeanors can be a variety of things. You could be walking along littering, and you might even be cited for a misdemeanor, depending on what happens, right? Now, misdemeanor is when, again, you go to court. It's not just having an interaction with the cops. I want to make that clear. This has nothing to do with traffic violations. If you go to traffic court, anything like that, this is not, those aren't criminal offenses. We are talking strictly about criminal offenses that could get you in trouble, okay? So a felony, we already talked about a felony. A felony is like more than a year in jail after you go to court, okay? That, you're out. If you have more than 2 misdemeanors, usually a misdemeanor is something less than a year in jail for each offense, okay? If you have more than 2, please don't submit your application, okay? If you have 1, we would recommend that you talk to a lawyer to make sure that that's not a major offense. Because again, remember I talked about discretionary, even though, you know, even though you may be eligible according to all these requirements, the government may still reject your application, okay, if they consider the misdemeanor to be a serious issue. One of the serious issues could be being affiliated with a gang or being affiliated with a terrorist. I'm hoping there's no terrorist in here or else we're all in trouble. But if you're being accused of being a terrorist or being accused of being in a gang, even though you may have just 1 misdemeanor or less than 1 misdemeanor, you may have issues. So on all these issues, consult an attorney to kind of find out more, okay? So not a lot of people have issues with that, but still. You know, one of the things is this is a strict program. Sometimes a lot of people don't qualify for these strict programs, okay? But I do want to reassure you that even if you did not qualify for this specific program, there are a lot of announcements that were made in November of last year that have made life for immigrants a little bit better in this country, okay? Despite the fact that we're looking at a court situation right now. But we did see the end of this program that's called Secure Communities. Secure Communities was a program in which government was automatically, local government was required to cooperate with ICE on any arrests taking place, okay? So anybody that could have been picked up for littering or anybody that could have been picked up on a minor offense, when they ran their fingerprints, if they clicked with ICE, technically, immigration could have easily picked them up. And it led to the deportation of hundreds of thousands, even in our own community here in Montgomery County and in Prince George's County. Okay, we're under a new situation, and there's a new agreement between the feds and local cops that we're not going to get into here because it's a long other discussion. But the requirement that municipal cops collaborate with federal immigration officials is over. Okay, now we're looking at new agreements that are being agreed upon on a city-by-city basis, really focusing exclusively on people with extensive criminal backgrounds. Okay, they're not looking at deporting people that are just littering or that just have a tail light out and were pulled over by the cops. Okay, so that is one of the advantages that now we're seeing, again, as a result of all this collective action that we have done as a community. Okay, so even those that don't benefit shouldn't fear talking to the police. Okay, if you're a victim, if you need the services of the cops, remember, they're paid through your taxes, right? They're there to serve you. And now there's a lot more restrictions on the collaboration they have with federal officials. So please do not fear, and don't let your parents or your neighbors or your family members fear going to the police. Okay? So, and as I mentioned, you know, the focus of ICE is now on deporting people with extensive criminal backgrounds. The era of large sweeps, immigration sweeps, where people would come and go to an employer and deport a huge group of people is over, okay? There's always going to be bad actors. There's always going to be racist cops, and there's always going to be some less than progressive leaders in different elected offices, right? But we still have to hold them accountable because now they're not required by the federal government to act in that way. So there are legal recourses to keep them apart, okay? So quickly going to go here, and then we're going to move on. But so if you have issues with if you've been detained by the police in the past, as I mentioned, make sure you get as much information as possible before you apply. Okay? So get your FBI. Everybody has the right to obtain their own FBI record. It's a simple process. You send basically you go get your fingerprints at a local shop that provides that service. You send your fingerprints to the specific address, and you get an FBI printout of your entire criminal record, okay? So that way you can be sure of what's in the possession of the government. Because remember, the first thing that's going to happen when you submit your application is that they're going to make an appointment for you to go get fingerprinted. Why do they do that? So they can check your criminal background, right? You want to make sure you know what's on your record before they know, right? So you can get that before you apply. It's like $10. It's really cheap. You go to a place. There's a couple of places in Rockville. There's a couple of places in Gaithersburg that provide that service. You fill out a quick form. You send it to the FBI. Okay? So just make sure you have as much information as possible of any interaction you had with the cops. Okay? Now, quickly, to prove, you're going to need two quick things when you apply for DACA. You're going to have to prove your identity. Okay? So make sure you have your passport, or, you know, different consulates have different IDs as well. There's, in Mexico, for example, there's a matrícula consular. El Salvador has the DUI. Those are valid as well. You can use those. If you don't have access to a passport or one of those IDs, you can get a birth certificate. A birth certificate in combination with a photo ID works as well to prove your identity. Okay? And the second thing is you're going to have to prove that you were in the country from that specific date. Remember, we talked about the specific dates, June 15th of 2007. You're going to need to prove that you've been living in the country since that date until now, till the date that you apply. So how are you going to do that? This is a quick example of what information you can provide. But For those of you that have been in school since 2007, it's the best thing you can have is a transcript, okay? Because the transcript shows you were at school that entire year, right? So quick transcripts is one of the best things you can have. If you don't have access to the transcripts, which I hope you do, but then you get in a little bit more trouble because you're going to have to find a combination of different documents that prove that you've been living here from that date. So yeah, you're gonna need those documents. And remember, it's a little bit difficult sometimes, and a little bit it's a little bit difficult to find. I mean, I can't find a document from 2007 in my own house, right? That's a very difficult thing to find. But don't worry, there are solutions. There are ways. We all have access to all of this. If you have a bank account, you can go back to your bank and get records from the beginning, from when you first opened up the bank account or when your parents opened the bank account. Tax records, if your parents paid taxes on an annual basis, that's very helpful, and your name appears on that. So this is where you rely on people like us, and you come to our office to help you navigate through all of this, okay? So, but please find as much information and as many documents as possible, and then bring them to a place like CASA, and we'll help you from there, okay? So, I keep saying it's the last thing. This is the last thing, okay? Please, please, one thing I just want to remind people, there's a lot of folks out there, I'm sure you know in our community, there's these people called notarios, right? Notarios in our home countries is an official thing. It's basically an attorney, right? Notarios are licensed. Notarios are huge in our community. Here, there's a lot of people that call themselves notarios and are basically like an idiot who opened up a shop, okay? Some of them are good people, I'm not gonna lie. There's a lot of them that aren't, okay? So please be wary of them. Please be aware of what your rights are and aware of what services are available around you, okay? So one thing I wanted to point out is, remember, DAPA, the program for the parents, DAPA, that's the program that's being reviewed in the courts, okay? Please don't trust anybody that tells you that you can apply for DAPA today, or that your parents can apply for DAPA today. It doesn't exist right now. It doesn't exist today. We're gonna change that, but it does not exist today. So please don't believe them, okay? And don't give them any money to say, oh, you can be the first one to apply. You'll be the number one. It's not open yet, but it will be soon. Give me $5,000. They literally do that, okay? Do not pay them a cent if they're telling you it's for a DAPA application, okay? Always ask for receipts, no matter what you pay for. First of all, I want you guys to come to CASA for services, but if not, just remember, ask for receipts of anything you do, of anything that you pay for. Okay, don't sign anything you do not understand. Make sure it's in your language. If you don't understand it in English, I demand that it's translated. Okay, but don't sign any document that you do not understand. And remember, don't pay large amounts for assistance on this. There are people charging for DACA, even for DACA, there are people charging thousands and thousands of dollars to help you through this process, okay? We charge members $50, okay? So we all have expenses we have to pay. I have to pay attorneys, I have to pay staff. We charge $50 for all of our members to apply for DACA, okay? May or may not want to go through us, but remember, wherever you go, there are other service options that are reliable, okay? They may not be the quickest, and they're not going to promise you the sun and the moon like some of these other folks, but remember there's options, okay? So please don't pay large amounts. Okay, so I might have another slide, but that's it.
So hi, my name's Linda Robinson, and I'm a counselor here at Montgomery College, and I'm going to be introducing our student panelists, well, our former student panelists, our Montgomery College alum that I'm so proud to know. But I did want to tell you that if you have questions about how DACA gives you benefits in terms of getting higher education, in terms of going to college, please, I can answer those questions after our panelists speak. If you have questions about what benefits do you get with DACA in terms of education, like can you apply for financial aid, are there scholarships, I have a handout with that information here. Also, if you have questions about the Maryland DREAM Act and how that might be different from DACA, I would be happy to help you. I've been working in higher education since 1981. And since 1985, 86, 87, at that point in time, I was in New York, and I was starting to meet students that were here without papers. We didn't have certain words that we used at that time, like undocumented. It was kind of rare to see that because at that point in time, in order to go to college, you could, many states, well not all states, but many states, especially in the Northeast and the Mid-Atlantic, allowed students to go to college without legal papers. You didn't have to have a social security number to apply to go to college. But the problem with going to college for many students that didn't have papers is that they would have to pay as out-of-state residents. So if they went to a public university, there are two tuition rates. One is for people who are residents, which is usually the cheaper tuition rate, and one for people who cannot prove that they're residents of the state. So students without papers were not able to get that cheaper rate, which meant it was very expensive. And so therefore, you didn't see a lot of students coming into education. When I was in New York, there was a mayor, his name was Edward Koch. I don't know if some of you may know Mayor Koch. He passed away, but one of the things he did in the early 90s, late 80s, was to say that any student who didn't have papers in New York City could go to the City University of New York schools and pay like an in-state student. So we started to see more students coming in. I came back to Maryland and worked at the University of Maryland. And I noticed in my office where I worked in the international office, so a lot of the students without papers came to my office. I had students crying because they had been admitted to the university. They had very good grades. Most of you know, getting to Maryland is difficult. But they were crying because they found out that they had to pay like an out-of-state resident. And these were students who had lived here many of them since they were 2 years old, whose parents were working, whose parents were paying taxes, but they couldn't take advantage of the in-state tuition benefit. So when I came to Montgomery College, I was so happy to find out that Montgomery College was the only community college, the only college in the whole state of Maryland, where students that were undocumented could come, and if they graduated from a high school in Montgomery County, they could come and pay in-state or in-county tuition rates. They could get that cheaper tuition. They could be treated as residents for the tuition purposes. So consequently, because of that, there were many students that came here who were undocumented. And through that, I think one of the wonderful things that I saw happening was students started to get together to organize clubs, to participate in places like Casa de Maryland and other organizations like United We Dream that started to push for immigration reform, for the National Dream Act, and later for the Maryland Dream Act. So everybody's heard of the Maryland Dream Act, right? So these are two students that I'm so proud to know, because these students, Jose and Yves, when they were here, they became active in the movement. And they themselves faced the problem of not having papers, not having legal status, and all those obstacles and all the fear that comes with being a student in that situation. Yet they pushed on, and not only did they push on, they had the courage to speak out, to identify themselves, to be able to say, I'm undocumented, and I'm going to fight for my rights. So they were both students that got involved in the movement early on, and really it's because of them, and I think, I really say this with all sincerity, both of them were leaders in Maryland for the Maryland Dream Act, and I think because of students like them, the Maryland Dream Act was passed. And then later, of course, President Obama had the executive order with DACA. Just quickly to make you understand, if you have DACA, you're a student and you live in the state of Maryland, you can go to a Maryland State University, and if you have DACA and show that DACA information to your college, they should treat you as an in-state resident for tuition purposes. The Maryland Dream Act is kind of something that happened first, and it allows students who were enrolled in high school in the state of Maryland for 3 years and can prove that their parents or they were paying taxes during that time and since that time to get in-state benefits. So you can either use DACA or Maryland Dream Act now. The one piece I want to distinguish, this is my understanding, that because we know that DACA is temporary, we only know that we have the assurance of DACA until the next president comes into the White House. If DACA is not extended, we all hope that it will be, and there'll be a greater immigration reform. But if it's not extended, if you can think that the Maryland DREAM Act is going to give you some protection as a college student. But the Maryland DREAM Act also requires you to first come to a community college, and then from here you can transfer to a four-year school after obtaining 60 credits. So if you use DACA to go to, let's say you use DACA and you get into the University of Maryland, you can get in-state benefits right now, but if for some terrible reason, and we don't expect this, but if something happens and the next president and the White House doesn't extend DACA anymore, then at some point that might be a problem. That Maryland State University might not be able to give you, continue your in-state tuition. If you enter through a community college and qualify for a Maryland DREAM Act, then you can transfer to a four-year university and still get the in-state benefits. But other than that, I do want to now focus our attention to Jose and Yves and tell you a little bit about them. Jose graduated from Montgomery College with his degree in nursing. He, after that, he started working as a nurse in a community center, like a community health clinic, helping the poor and the uninsured. Now I heard he's working for Adventist Healthcare as a operating room nurse. In fact, he was telling me that he got off his shift at like 11 o'clock last night, and he changed his shift to the 6 o'clock shift this morning so he could be here with us tonight. So he had like 5 hours of sleep last night. And I was asking him, how do you go to an operating room and help the doctors on 5 hours of sleep? But hey, he can do it. He's currently getting his bachelor's in nursing while he's working. He's a DACA student. He'll tell you a little bit of what life has been like before and after DACA. And Yves Gomez graduated from Montgomery College around the same time. He went on to the University of Maryland and got a BS in biochemistry. And he now is attending the School of Pharmacy at the University of Maryland, Baltimore, as well as working as a pharmacy technician. And he's been the youngest person and the first undocumented person to serve on, and I'm going to ask you because I forgot that the South Asia, tell me the organization, the labor organization. Asian Pacific American Labor Alliance, APALA for short. Okay, so APALA, and it's a labor organization, so maybe he can talk a little bit about that experience. But he also was very involved with United We Dream, with CASA, and other organizations that were pushing for immigration reform. If we can take a couple of minutes, I'd like to show you a video that was taken of Yves back when you were just, I think, finishing high school. And this is like when your mother takes pictures of you as a baby and shows it to your new boyfriend, and you have spaghetti sauce or something, arroz con pollo all over your face. But Yves shouldn't be embarrassed about this, because basically what I think is interesting about the video, it captures what was going on in his life at that time. He was facing deportation, and he was in a place where he wasn't sure what was going to happen to him next. He wanted to go to college, but here he was facing the immigration problems that people faced without that protection that DACA has given to many people. So let's show the video, and then we'll have Yves and Jose talk.
I'm America.
I am 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 America.
We are America.
My name is Yves Gomes, and I am America. I came from India when I was 1.5 years old. Came with my mom, my aunt, uncle, and 2 cousins. I was always happy at home. I've learned that American culture from them, and I've always enjoyed it. As I was growing up, I didn't know any other country. As far as I knew, I was whatever all my other friends were, and they're American, and I consider myself the same as them.
One day, his mother called me, They took his father, police came and took him. So from that day on, it's been 2 years now. And it had been very difficult for us, for the whole family, especially for Harold.
His dad was like my big brother, because I never had a big brother. I was the eldest, so I never had a big brother. And so his dad was in his 20s when I was a teenager. And now I think that I have the opportunity to do the same for Eves.
Harold is probably, I would say, he's the strongest person I know because he's sitting in his wheelchair with the trach. Yet he's so optimistic about life, and he's just, when you're around him, you feel like this person is strong. He'll take care of me.
He has a hidden greatness about him. That's how I would put it. Very virtuous, very virtuous. That I learned a lot from him. I learned a lot from him.
We drove her to the airport, and the immigration officer met us there. She left, and then she left my brother and myself alone with my granduncle and grandaunt.
Aaron especially cried at the airport because I never seen him crying. And Eves was little brave big brother.
The whole family is broken. It's one after the other. Their family is being broken.
He was a very hardworking student. I can believe in spite of all that, he did his best. He stayed up, he studied, he did his work, he helped his little brother.
He has gone through a whole lot of disturbance, like his parents been deported, and he kept up his studies. I mean, I wonder how many kids would do that.
Well, I told my closest friends, and they were like, "Hey, we'll take care of you," which they did. They're like the best friends I have, like the best friends any kid could ask for. And yeah, they've been taking care of me. They're part of the reason I'm not sad all the time.
Now the time has come for Eves to leave. Eves got a notice already. On the 13th of August, he has to leave this country.
I really don't understand why he would have to leave. I mean, they don't know him. They don't know. If they knew him, there's no way they would get him out of here. The disease I have, it weakens all the muscles in the body. If Eves has to leave this country, there's a possibility I'll never see him again in this life.
He doesn't know anything of India. He never been to India. He doesn't know the culture. He doesn't know the language. He doesn't know anything of India. And all his life, it is like he's an American.
We try to be hopeful in spite of hopelessness. So we're still positive, even though it's at the last moment.
Whatever happens, I know it'll be difficult, but I'll just have to keep doing what I'm doing. I'm gonna have to keep pushing, do good in school, and eventually get to that point where I want to be, which is to become a doctor. And I don't know what the path is, but the thing is I have to do it.
That gets me every time I see it. And everything they say about Eves is true. I can tell you. I've known him for years, and he's really that kind of wonderful person. But Eves and Jose, I don't know if we can start just by telling, if you want to tell a little bit about your immigration story, things that we don't know, fill us in on that, and then talk to us about what has happened, about your journey through college, the obstacles you faced, and then getting DACA, and how has that changed the outcome of maybe how, the outcome for you in terms of your career prospects now and the types of things that you're doing now.
So, I'm Jose, and I came to this country when I was 15 years old. And I came because I was on a car accident back in Honduras. So my parents had to sell everything they had in order for us to afford the surgery that I needed in my neck. So I had the surgery done at Johns Hopkins University Hospital, but like I said, my parents sold everything, and the houses, the cars that they had back in Honduras, and they decided that due to my new medical condition, I needed to relocate to the United States. So that's the reason why we came to the U.S. At the beginning, my parents told me it was going to be something temporary, and then they dropped the news that, hey, by the way, you're going to be here for a while. So I always knew that I wanted to do something in the medical field, and due to my new immigration status, I didn't know how to achieve it. I was always getting good grades in school and everything. And then I graduated, and I had no clue how I could afford going to any university or college for that matter. So I applied to Montgomery College, and at the beginning I didn't knew if I was going to be eligible for the in-county tuition or not. So I was very nervous because it meant paying pretty much double if I had to pay like out-of-state tuition, and I couldn't afford it. I still remember the call that I got when they called me from the counseling office, and they're like, so we're gonna charge you as in-county tuition. And that was probably one of my happiest days because it meant that I could go to school and actually afford it. Now, the other part that I miss is that who's gonna pay for it? So I had to find a job in order to pay for my school. So, like many undocumented immigrants around the area, I got a job as an electrician in construction. So I would go and work as a construction worker 3 days a week, and I would come to school 2 days a week. And it was very, very grueling, waking up early and doing all the hard work and school, having that balance and paying bills, paying school, so it was very grueling. And then I graduated in 2011, December 2011. At that time, DACA was still not on, hadn't even heard about DACA by that time. So I had an associate's degree in nursing, but I was working as an electrician because that's all I could do. So at the time that President Obama made the announcement, I remember that I was starting to get involved with CASA at that time. And I remember my phone constantly ringing, and I was on top of a ladder, a 16-foot ladder actually, so it was pretty high. And then my phone is ringing, and it's like everybody's like texting me, hey, look, check the news, Obama made an announcement, I'm like, what are they talking about, right? And they made the announcement, and he announced DACA, and that was it. I knew that was the moment that I made it. I can work in the profession that I want to work now, and I can be the nurse that I've always dreamed to be. So yeah, it was very grueling, very tasking. It was hard, but it was worth it. I still remember, I always tell that my life changed in a matter of 4 months. So I got my work permit by Thanksgiving of 2012. I got my social security number in December, and I had a job at the clinic in January. So if we want to talk about what is the impact that DACA can have in someone's life, it completely turned my life around in 3 months. So that's the impact that this executive order has, and that's why we need to keep advocating, because it's only a temporary thing. It's like 2 years. I always joke around that my life is planned in 2-year segments, because that's what it is. It's like, I don't know, by the time my work permit expires, like, what am I gonna do? Like, is it gonna be a president that is friendly to DACA-mented students, or what if it's not? Like, what am I gonna do? Like, am I gonna be deported? It's always a fear that I have. And I think sometimes that fear is what makes me to become more of a voice and an advocate for myself and for others that are in our same situation. Because if we don't speak up about the injustice, then no one else will. And so that's why we organize as students, we organize our communities and fight back. And I don't know You want to say anything, Yves?
Sure. You hear me?
Is the little light on?
Hello. Okay. So after that video was filmed, I actually got a call back from Montgomery College. It was from Miss Maria Adams, and she was the coordinator for the Montgomery Scholars Program. And it's a scholarship program that is open to any student regardless of immigration status. So for those of you who are currently in middle school, high school, or know undocumented students who want to be able to access higher education, Scholars Program is a great place to apply. And so I applied to this program. She called me back the day after she found out I was going to stay, and she asked me, do you want to take up the offer? We want to open up that spot for you. And I was like, yes, I do. And because back in 2010, there was no such thing as the Maryland DREAM Act. So that meant that all colleges outside from Montgomery College, which is the best, didn't really invite or accommodate the unique needs of undocumented students. So I remember my first week of school, it was crazy. It was during lunchtime. I sat down next to one of my classmates, and I'm really awkward, so I didn't know what to talk to this guy about. But I was like, okay, he's black and he likes politics. So I'm like, hey, Jonathan, what do you think about Wyclef Jean running for president of Haiti? And for those of you who don't know who Wyclef Jean is, he was part of the group The Fugees, made great music. And so I asked Jonathan, he just gives me a blank stare. He's like, who's that? I don't know who that is. And there was this awkward silence. And yeah, just like this. It was real awkward. And then I don't know what possessed me to ask him this, but I was like, what do you think about our nation's immigration system? And that's when he told me, funny you ask, because I'm undocumented, and I found out about this program through like a really good community organization called Liberty's Promise. And I was like, wait, no way, I'm undocumented too. And he's like, wait, no way, you're the kid I was on the cover of the news the other day. I was like, yeah. And from that point on, we kind of said, wouldn't it be cool to start up a student club for like kids like ourselves? Because I'm sure there are more kids just like us at this school. And that's when we got connected to Casa Maryland. The youth organizer at the time, Rosa Lozano, and I remember one of their head organizers, Gustavo Andrade, first invited me out to a rally over the course of the summer. And I remember we marched downtown in front of the White House, and it was such a powerful image because you have these little children, maybe 3, 4, 5 years old, chanting, Obama, Obama, don't deport my mama. And it really touched me. And from there on out, I just remember going to Casa Maryland on Saturdays. And what really got me involved was we had a Know Your Rights training. And it's like, what do you do if immigration and customs enforcement ever comes to your doorstep, comes for your family? What are you to do? And we learned what defensive measures we can take to make sure that our house families can remain intact and remain safe. And I think for me, I remember thinking, had I known this a few months back, my parents maybe still would have been here. And I think that's what got me first to step foot into the community work and to realize the importance of organizations that work within the community like Casa Maryland, who really are in touch with the people whom they serve. And I think, from there on out, it was kind of history. We started up the student club, and our club advisor was none other than Professor Linda Robinson. And from there, we did advocacy for the DREAM Act. We were able to get it on the ballot. I remember we testified alongside our college president in talking about why it was so important to get this passed. And ultimately, we got it passed. We won the referendum campaign, and it's law. And after that, you see that undocumented youth, especially, demanded the deferred action of childhood arrivals, and that's not something that the president willingly gave. It's because youth had the courage and the audacity to go out, talk to people like themselves, and demand change. So I think today, I know I'm speaking out here in front of you, but at this point, like I understand that I'm a first-year pharmacy school student. I'm able to do something that like 0.0001% of our community is able to do, and I shouldn't be the one speaking for our community. It should be you who are still struggling to get your education. It should be your parents who have been kind of put outside the bubble of like who's kind of less deserving immigrant. It should be our brothers and sisters who may have a criminal records, but whose voices are always excluded from this conversation. Because when you label someone as a criminal, you automatically label them as like inhumane. So I think for me, over the last 3, 4, 5 years, it's been a really good experience to not only do community work, but to be able to listen and to meet other people who are also undocumented like myself, and to realize like their struggle is just as important, is just as legitimate as mine. Like I said, I'm able to go to college, so I know a lot of you here might be students, have questions about accessing higher education. I'm more than happy to answer your questions. And before we move on, yeah, so we can move on with the questions.
I did my renewal through Casa de Maryland, so I paid the $50 and and it was a very, very smooth process actually. So I gathered all the information. That was the most complicated part because getting your transcripts, I had to get like college transcripts, I had to get high school transcripts, and you know, I graduated from high school in 2007, so there was 2012, and they didn't had my transcript on my high school, so I had to go to Central Records, and it was quite a bunch of hoops that I had to jump in order to get them. But once you get the information, it was pretty straightforward.
For myself, the renewal process was a little bit confusing because since 2010, I have what's called a final order of removal. So because of that, my legal case is a little bit complicated. So I renewed my paperwork through my attorney. But I was also a volunteer at many of the Casa de Maryland DACA clinics. And I will say for the price of $50, compared to like so many other sort of workshops I've attended and knew about, it's $50 is very affordable compared to paying $200, $300 to an attorney you don't even know and putting your life basically in their hands. So I think definitely there are a lot of organizations that put together these sort of DACA clinics. Casa de Maryland is one that's in our local area. And for those who are tight on money, which is most of our families, I would definitely recommend doing the renewal process through a community org or like someone you trust, as opposed to trying to do it by yourself or through an attorney you've never worked with. Yeah.
Yeah, and generally renewals are a lot more straightforward than the initial applications. You know, as Jose talked about, getting that initial list of documents you saw, like an example, is really a pain for a lot of folks. And the renewal is a lot more straightforward if nothing has changed in that interim period. And you know, you come to an organization, for example, like us, we have your paperwork when you originally filed initially, so it's just a matter of signing a couple of documents and renewing the information and you know, putting new information in there. But it's usually pretty straightforward. But the heavy load is always on the initial application. Yes, again, you know, just to reemphasize, it is a discretionary program, right? Which means that even if you do or don't qualify according to specific criteria, there may be still either a shot that you may be booted or not, which is a little complicated. There are certain things that are very strict, as I mentioned. The felony, no. I mean, unfortunately, they don't bend at all on felonies. They don't bend at all on dates. You know, if you're missing it by one date, you know, you're off the cutoff. You know, for example, the June 15th, 2007 deadline, you know, you miss those dates by one day, you're basically out. But the discretion comes particularly so in the misdemeanor situations. There are a variety of misdemeanors. You know, sometimes folks have two, sometimes folks may have misdemeanors on their record. That's one of the reasons why, you know, if you have one misdemeanor, if you have any kind of interaction with the police, any kind of conviction, we ask that you get records, all records you have of that particular case. Couple of reasons why. There are mistakes that are done. There are, especially with undocumented immigrants, many of our names, if you noticed, are rather long and have, you know, 2 or 3 different last names, 2 or 3 first names. Sometimes there's cases of mistaken identity in some cases. There's cases of misdemeanors being associated with each other and maybe not clarified at the court level, you know, whether this is one distinct case or are these 2 different charges for which you're being accused of, et cetera. So there's a bunch of different situations where that discretion could lie on either, you know, where the discretion plays a huge factor. So in cases where you have situations where you might have two misdemeanors, you may even have a third one, which technically disqualifies you if there are a variety of mitigating factors that explain that misdemeanor. Perhaps you were being arrested, as these 2 gentlemen were on many occasions, for actions demanding justice on a particular activity. They were affiliated with an action that CASA did. You know, CASA could provide some information and provide a letter to that, you know, to USCIS explaining that particular incident. So there's a variety of things, but I think what's important is to be very honest and open when you apply, when you go seek assistance from, let's say CASA, let's say an attorney, whoever you are. Always be 100% honest with that individual when they're helping you complete that application, because you never know the situation, and they'll take you at your word. So if you're not providing that individual the full information, you could run the risk of, first of all, losing your money, because if you go to an attorney, you're paying God knows how much money. You know, you're going to lose your money. That's not if you don't get accepted. If your DACA isn't approved, you're not getting that money back, right? Or you could even get deported if you were trying to hide some situation that you thought might have reflected negatively on you on your application. But at the same time, you know, possibly those misdemeanors can be not explained away, but they could be explained.
So you can do what Eves did with Jonathan and create a group, or also you can work within groups that are already been created. I remember that when we were advocating for the Maryland DREAM Act, I was working with the Latino Student Union in Tacoma Park, in the Tacoma Park campus, and we were distributing information about question number 4. We were giving flyers, bottoms, and also we were helping register voters. So that was one of the tools that we used in order to talk about the issue and educate voters on that respect.
Yeah, and to kind of speak on the side of the campus-based organizing. So basically, I remember they have tabling events. So we started up our student club. We came up with the name. I think we called it the Immigrant Rights Organization. And we tabled, and we just had the sign-up sheet, and people came to us. And it was maybe a group of 6, 7, 8 of us at first. And we had an awesome advisor and Professor Robinson and so many others, like all of you here, who are faculty at this school, who are very supportive of undocumented youth and undocumented people. And once you get your club going, I mean, you're going to be on campus on a regular basis. So it's easy to meet maybe once a week or once every 2 weeks with your student group. And I think the really great part of it that I took out was being able to empower each other. So I know if you don't have papers, if you're undocumented, up until this recently, we were always called like illegal, and it really takes a toll on you, and you get depressed, and you face challenges that probably maybe your other friends who aren't undocumented don't really understand. And I think to be able to create that space, a safe space for people like yourself is really important. And on that note, I want to say that once you create the space, how do you make it more than just like a club to hang out, which is important and it's good to hang out with each other, but how do you also plug yourself into what is important and relevant to the community? And I think one of the easiest steps to get involved is to create your group first, do your own thing, but also plug into organizations like Casa Maryland, like many community orgs in your area who are already doing this work, and see how you can plug in. And once you get that, you have a better idea of how you want to go out your own work.
So in terms of like what's going on now with DAPA and what the timelines are, that we can have a whole nother discussion on just that topic, but real briefly. Just to set the time, just to review a little bit. So, we talked a little bit about last November. It's actually coming up. November 20th was when the president made his announcement, similar to how he announced DACA, right? He announced it on November 20th of last year, opened up the opportunity. Basically, he was going to expand DACA, right? That was step one. He was going to expand it from 2 years to 3 years, and he was going to expand the entry period to 2010 instead of 2007. So he's going to maybe 1 million, maybe 800,000, and 1 million more kids were going to qualify under DACA. And he was going to create this new program called DAPA. So it was going to be essentially the same program, 3 years of work authorization, for parents of U.S. citizen children. So if you were a parent of a child that was born here, you had an opportunity to get a work permit, just like the DACA kids, right? Again, going to be 3 years. So we kind of tied the two together, and they had his initial implementation date was going to start in April and May of last year. It was going to stagger, expanded DACA was going to be February, and the new DAPA program was going to be April of this year, right? So technically, all of us were going to be busy helping a bunch of our folks apply for this great opportunity, right? So what happened? So before February could come in, the Republicans decided to get together and contest this. So about 26 different states, Republican states, all Republican governors and Republican attorney generals said, we don't like this. As a matter of fact, they had some kind of, I know I'm television, so I don't want to use any harsh language, but very, very weak arguments, let's say, on why this program was bad, including that it was going to cost the government a whole lot of money. Every study from every university, everywhere you go, says that this is a huge boon to the economy. And we can see the example right here. These are two great people now that are fully engaged in this community, are bringing great benefits both economically and through their work to society in general. So think about these two guys multiplied by 5 million, and that's the benefit, right, of this program. So they went through this ridiculous system, and they contested in circuit court, in federal circuit court in Texas. And so basically, long story short, and I know I already went way too long, is the circuit court is taking a long time to decide on the multitude of appeals that this group of 26 governors and 26 attorney generals and 26 Republicans have put together. Basically, everybody's made their argument. The federal government, Department of Justice, which is supporting DAPA and its implementation, have already presented before the court. The Republicans have already presented before the court. And this circuit court, which the people that are going to make the decision on whether to go forward or whether or not, is actually going to be a panel of just 3 judges. The circuit court is composed of 17 judges, I think. It's a much larger body, but there's only going to be 3 judges that are going to make the decision on this. And guess what? 2 out of those 3 are Republican. Well, we can't say they're Republican. They were nominated by Republican presidents, right? They were put there by President Bush, and I think the other one was President Reagan. So we know what's going to happen, right? We know they're going to favor the Republican argument, and they're going to vote for stopping. They're going to vote positively on the appeal. But they're taking their sweet time doing this. They were supposed to decide months ago. Well, they're supposed to decide at least a month and a half ago. They're still taking, why are they taking their time? Because they know what's going to happen is that our side, and this time it's the federal government that's on our side, the Department of Justice, immediately when they receive that decision, they're going to take it to the Supreme Court. And that's where it's ultimately going to be decided. The problem is that the Supreme Court, you know, just like everybody else, they do their calendar, right? And so they have to quickly, Department of Justice has to quickly appeal the decision of the Circuit Court to the Supreme Court within a matter of weeks for the Supreme Court to put it on their calendar, their docket, for 2016. Okay, so the clock is ticking, and the Republicans know the clock is ticking. And so what their strategy has been is just to wait, and just to wait, and just to wait, and just to wait, and wait till the clock ticks down on the Obama administration, or at least until the Supreme Court has already filled their docket for the 2016 year, right? There's still hope, though. There's still hope. That's why when you go to the website of USCIS, it basically says, look, like prepare your documents, because they have orders. USCIS, when the U.S. Citizen and U.S. Citizen and Immigration Service, which is the one that's going to process the applications, just like they process DACA, they already have orders. They have to prepare. They already have a plan to hire more people to be able to deal with this influx of 5 million applications that will be coming in, right? So they're just waiting as well. And so if you go to their website, you know, they'll have some information on how to prepare, what documents to prepare, but they can't accept applications until this gets resolved in court, right? So essentially, you know, what we think will happen is, you know, there's still a possibility that the Circuit Court will come up with a decision within the next few weeks. You know, they could then, if they don't come up with a decision mid-November, then they're going to use the holidays as an excuse, and then we'll see this drag on further, right? If they do come up with a decision within the next couple of weeks, you'll see the Department of Justice appeal immediately and send it up to the Supreme Court and see if we can put it on the docket of the Supreme Court. Honestly, the best laid scenario is that Supreme Court puts it on their docket. There's a hearing scheduled sometime in late winter, early spring, perhaps April, March and April of next year. If that happens, that's the best case scenario. If that happens, we could be looking at implementation by the summer, right? That's what we're planning for. We're going to be ready nonetheless, just like we were with DACA. When we forced these guys, we didn't force them. They were great at helping us with DACA. You know, we're going to do the same thing and start recruiting folks just here and helping us to create large clinics to help all of our community benefit. You know, in the best case scenario, you know, we're hoping that in the summer we see implementation. If not, it's going to be tricky. If it doesn't get on the docket of the Supreme Court doesn't have even if this gets on the docket of the Supreme Court, but we don't see anything until the summer. I mean, we're basically looking at implementation during the November elections, which is kind of unlikely. And we know this is temporary, but again, it stresses the point to get. Although some of us may not be eligible to vote, we know people that vote. We have family members that vote. We know others. We have neighbors that vote. We have family members that vote. We need to get out there and register people to vote and make sure that whoever takes up that office not only continues to commit to DAPA and expanded DACA, and perhaps make it even better, but make sure that they're held accountable to their promises, right? We know that Hillary Clinton, for example, has talked about, oh, no, you know, it's not just going to be DAPA, it's going to be something even better. All right, what does that mean? We have to engage folks. We know that Martin O'Malley is another candidate for president, right? Martin O'Malley was governor of this state when the Maryland Dream Act was enacted, when we got driver's license for all undocumented immigrants. his path to the White House seems a little difficult, nonetheless. But he has a great record when we talk about immigrant rights, right? Bernie Sanders, we know he has a great tongue about what he thinks of immigrant rights. It's a little bit still up in the air. We need to engage him more. Republicans, if there are any Republicans in here, forgive me, but with what you've heard of Republicans, I think you know what's going on. That's not a party that is right now representing our best interests, I think by far. It's a party that's talking about building walls and charging Mexico for the wall. I'm Mexican, so I'm like, how are we going to afford the wall? We don't want a wall. Anyway.
You better get your wallet ready.
That's right. I better get my wallet ready. So at any rate, again, so I'm sorry, that's a long-winded answer to your question. Yeah, and let me clarify what I don't want to encourage is people, for example, with a felony on their record to think that there might be a path to DACA. Unfortunately, like I said, there's certain things that are really non-negotiable with USCIS. But again, if you have questions, please go to trusted entities. Go to, for example, CASA. Go to people who've been there before as well. People like these gentlemen that have been through the process. Go to people that know the process if you have questions on those situations. Don't act alone if you think you're on the borderline, right? But as I said, there's some strict requirements that really you'll endanger yourself if you apply. And that's being conservative, because we really take pride in being conservative and protecting our members as much as possible, right? So we don't recommend you submit an application if you have a felony, for instance. But USCIS, again, the agency that's doing the applications, right? They're an office, they're an agency within the Department of Homeland Security, right? Department of Homeland Security is it's the largest government department agency in the government. So that includes, customs enforcement, that includes a lot of other security, that includes a whole range of offices. Okay, ICE, which is in charge of basically just deporting people and securing the borders, they also are within the same department. Okay, USCIS is the good one. ICE is the bad one, if I can simplify things, right? Now, USCIS has committed that the applications that they're receiving, okay, are strict, and the information that they receive is strictly for the purposes of, they're reviewing them strictly for the purposes of qualifying for this program, for these programs, okay? But if folks, that doesn't mean that if they flag an application for a certain risk factor, say gangs, say they get an application that has, or someone has a history with gangs, a history, or at least was classified as some sort of history with terrorism, or that has multiple felonies on their application, there is no guarantee that they will not communicate with ICE to deport that individual, okay? There is no guarantee, but again, we're talking, because they have a responsibility, it's in their mission, right? They still have a responsibility to report those people to the appropriate agency. Those are in cases, again, what we're talking about extreme issues. We're talking about terrorism. We're talking about, we're talking about multiple felonies, and we're talking about gang issues, right? That's when there's a risk that that application may be sent over to ICE for deportation. That's why we're very conservative on what applications, for example, at CASA, we submit. But again, seek legal counsel on those issues, or seek more information to make sure that that you're protecting yourself. Because the other factor I also wanted to talk about was, or that I also mentioned, was identity theft. And again, in our community, there's a lot of Jose Gonzalez's around. There's a lot of there's a lot of Juan Torres. We have common names, right? So we have to be careful with that. And because we're undocumented, there's very little. There's not a whole lot of identification that we all have to prove that we're not that specific individual. So again, if you fall in those medium areas, if you have multiple felonies, please take care of yourself. and be careful and seek counsel before submitting an application.